I really like reading manga, specifically shonen series. Not only do I enjoy a lot of them as stories, but owning or even just holding copies of manga is super fun to me. Something about them not being colored in or shaded like a Western comic book makes it feel like you get a more personal feel of the author's sketching style, and these books often contain interviews or comments from the creator, which makes you feel like you understand more aspects of the story as you read them. I've experienced lots of series through their manga, and basically every time I'll eat up these little comments or insights, they're super interesting to me. Over time, I've also realized something absolutely unbelievable. The people who make manga are nerds, and they often play video games and might talk about them in these volumes. What a coincidence. I talk about video games too. The reason for my interest in these manga authors' favorite video games is twofold. One, I like seeing how video games inspired manga, and two, I like seeing how video games are perceived in Japan, and how the industry over there overlaps or is different from the West. I looked at all kinds of translated interviews and more, so consider this video a sort of archive on the overlap between mangakas and video games, where we see what these artists do in the 2 minutes they're not being overworked. Sort of the catalyst for me making this video was when I found out how big a fan of video games Ryuko Kui, the mangaka for Delicious in Dungeon, is. She's a huge fan of lots of CRPGs like Divinity Original Sin, Baldur's Gate, even Planescape Torment and Disco Elysium. This one piece of fan art she made of all these elves from Western RPGs is nothing short of based, and there's absolutely no doubt many of the series she drew here could have inspired her work. In an interview with Famitsu magazine, Kui had like a shit ton of video game recommendations, which include stuff like Marvel's Spider-Man, Papers, Please, Inscription, and Return of the Obra Dinn, and lots of stuff I haven't even heard about. She's like, actually a nerd, and I genuinely respect her video game tastes. She also sort of got her start posting art online, so it's fitting that she has a connection to a lot of games that were made in Japan too. Some older games inspired her work as well, Wizardry 6 being a notable one. Wizardry and the Ultima series have always been interesting cases to me because they're computer games heavily inspired by the mechanics and gameplay of Dungeons & Dragons, which ended up being extremely popular in Japan, while D&D was always a niche thing there. So D&D had a huge influence on early JRPGs like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, but with a middleman in there. I bring this up because she actually went and researched D&D to get some inspiration for Delicious in Dungeon, which is really cool to find out, and Ryuko Kui stands out as a very positive example of video games and manga influencing one another. Hey, guess what? Another interview with her just dropped while I'm writing this. Turns out she's also played Panzer Dragoon, which got her interested in dragons and fantasy, and she's actually confirmed that she hadn't played any D&D before, so she did research it specifically for this series. Cool. Also, I'm angry at myself because I somehow did not know that Yasunori Mitsuda, the critically acclaimed composer of Mario Party and no other video games ever to exist, did the soundtrack for Delicious in Dungeon. I am not playing his music exclusively in the background on this video at all. I find that fact really cool, and, it reminds me of the manga creator who's probably the most famous for his relation to video games, since Yasunori Mitsuda did the soundtrack for Chrono Trigger, the late Akira Toriyama, creator of Dr. Slump and Dragon Ball, and designer of pretty much every design you see in Dragon Quest and Chrono Trigger. Toriyama was probably the artist with the most influence on video games ever, given how much the charm of his character designs elevated the world of Dragon Quest. Despite his immense influence to the medium, he's actually admitted to not having played that many video games after the Famicom era, since he ended up getting just a little too engrossed in them and took up too much valuable work time. He didn't really mention any video games in particular, but I'm sure he's played lots of Dragon Quest for obvious reasons. And I joked about mangaka being overworked earlier, but it is a genuine issue with the culture that takes creators' lives early, and it does a lot more than just prevent Toriyama from playing video games too much. Apologies if I'm laying on the dark stuff a little too much, but there's another manga creator who passed away recently and has a pretty fascinating connection to video games as well. Kentaro Miura, the creator of Berserk. He's mentioned liking games like Sakura Wars, Armored Core, Vandal Hearts, and believe it or not, even Mario Kart, but one of the most pervasive bits of misinformation on him related to video games is that the reason he took such frequent long hiatuses during the run of Berserk was because he was too addicted to the Idolmaster series of Idol Manager video games. Seriously, I found a thread on the Skull Knight forums, which is like a forum dedicated to Berserk fans, dating to 2009, discussing the idea that he's addicted to Idolmaster. Basically, he just mentioned enjoying the Idolmaster games and that he bought an Xbox 360 to play one of them. People then spun this into a rumor that this was somehow the reason he took such long breaks, clearly in a derogatory way. Miura's life was a constant struggle with unhealthy work habits, and it's just really disappointing to see that when he adopted something for his own leisure time, it got spun into a rumor that it was somehow overtaking his life, which has persisted for over a decade afterwards. It just goes to show that sometimes the intense pressure to continue working doesn't always come from a manga company's higher-ups. Although I will admit the fact that he plays Idolmaster is funny, for sure. Well, anyways, the creator of One Piece, Eiichiro Oda, likes Puyo Puyo. In a short little blurb on one of the volume releases, it lists his favorite video game as Puyo Puyo. I've always wondered if he just said Puyo Puyo to mean the series in total or just the first game. He's also done cover art for One Piece that's clearly an homage to Super Smash Bros. And all the series that's in it. And I think Darkstalkers? So he's probably a fan of them too. Oda wants Morrigan in Smash confirmed. This wasn't even the first time One Piece crossed over with Super Smash Bros. Because this was a real crossover for one of the 3DS One Piece games. It's so cool. Also, Oda owns a PS5. We saw the inside of his house one time. Oda is a confirmed PS5 owner. Alright, dude, I swear, it's like 11:15 p.m. right now, and I'm currently on a wild goose chase. There's one short author blurb on a manga volume in particular that got me interested in this topic in the first place, years ago. It was something I read in high school, where the author of this manga was debating which was the better game studio, Squaresoft or Enix, and praising Chrono Trigger, which the two studios collaborated on. I remember it because it's ironic now, considering the two companies have now merged into one. The problem is, I can't remember which mangaka wrote it. I read a lot of series in high school through my school's library, like Bleach, Hellsing, Naruto, and Hunter x Hunter, so I think it might have been one of them, but I am not sure. From digging into it a little, I have found that the creators of Naruto and Hunter x Hunter are both fans of Dragon Quest though. Masashi Kishimoto, who created Naruto, was inspired by the work of Akira Toriyama, both in his Dragon Ball and Quest form. Also, this is a bit random, but I looked through some of his older notes and manga volumes and I found this. Ninjas? Really? Ninjas? Yoshihiro Togashi, who wrote Hunter x Hunter and Yu Yu Hakusho, has been known to enjoy Dragon Quest as well. He's just as famous as Kentaro Miura for taking really long breaks during the publication of his work, and he even plays into the "I don't work as much because of video games" jokes. There's a famous picture of him playing Dragon Quest V I really like. Yes, that's really his workspace. Tite Kubo, who created Bleach, did some character designs for video games as well, most notably Sakura Wars 2019, but I couldn't find any evidence of him saying he played any. I've also remembered one more series I read in high school that could be a solid lead, D. Gray Man. The author is Katsura Hoshino, and you know, that was kinda hard to search in relation to video games because of Katsuhara Hashino, which is a completely different guy and works at Atlas. His name's just a single letter off. I was able to find though that she almost worked at a video game company before becoming a mangaka, although presumably it would have been as an artist. She also owns a PSP, and I also found out she listens to Final Fantasy music as she works, so she could definitely be our mysterious Chrono Trigger enjoyer. Enjoying Final Fantasy music definitely gets your respect from me. I couldn't find out who liked Chrono Trigger specifically, but if anyone can find out who it is, I'd appreciate it. I don't exactly think it was the Hellsing mangaka who said that. And yes, my school library had the entire Hellsing series, they were so cool. And finally, to finish off this video, I want to talk about one more manga creator confirmed to be a video game fan. Hiro Mashima, the mangaka of Fairy Tail. I've never read or fully watched Fairy Tail, and as a big One Piece fan, I have an inherent disposition to hating this series, but you know what? He's a cool case anyway, so I'll end off my video with him. To start with, he wrote a Monster Hunter manga at the same time he was writing Fairy Tail. And in an interview with Western fans, he said it was specifically because Capcom knew he was a fan of the games that he got the opportunity to work on it. This whole interview made me realize he's a Westaboo too, which is funny. He's not reaching Hideo Kojima or Araki levels, of course. Oh yeah, brief interlude. I couldn't find any evidence of Hirohiko Araki liking video games, but here's some pics of him playing JoJo games. That's cool. Besides Monster Hunter, Mashima once posted a tweet about his top 5 video games of 2020. Final Fantasy VII Remake, The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Yakuza Like a Dragon, and Sakuna of Rice and Ruin. Ghost of Tsushima over Yakuza? Really? That game's so overrated. Okay, sorry, I just went back to hating him. I've also never heard that much about Sakuna of Rice and Ruin, but judging by the fact that it's in Smash Ultimate, I'm gonna assume it's popular in Japan. It did receive an anime adaptation after all. Spider-Man Miles Morales and Assassin's Creed Valhalla were his honorable mentions. Damn, how does a manga author have so much time to play such big open-world games? He also made a list of 4 mobile games too, and Toon Blast? That's like the ultimate Facebook mom game. I didn't really expect him to be a fan of Toon Blast. So there we go. It's not really a huge wealth of stories here, and I'm sure a lot of information isn't really available to me in English, but hopefully at least one single individual that is not me found this interesting. I have some sources I use linked in the description, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.